Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and tonight we are talking about The Many Faces of Dean Winchester, Part 2. But before we dive into that lively discussion, I'm going to have my wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and you can find my stories in all sorts of anthologies. Hey, I started with Supernatural from the very first episode.
Okay, Carole?
I'm Carole Stokes. You can find me here on Facebook and in Continual. I'm a fanfic writer since 2012, and all my fanfics on AO3 under Fire Sign 10.
Anne?
Hi, I'm Ann Wicker, and I'm a former journalist and writer and editor. I came late to the Supernatural family, but I went completely down the rabbit hole, and I'm a unabashed Dean girl. I've edited and worked on numerous books, and here I am talking about Supernatural. I love it.
Melissa?
Hi, I'm Melissa. I have been a fan since the pilot when it first aired. And you can find me in the Supernatural TFWNC Facebook group, which our lovely host moderates.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, steampunk, and more. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, but all the modern worlds are ones where Sam and Dean could walk in and feel right at home with a shotgun full of salt. I got into Supernatural in season 11, binge watched 11 seasons in 4 months, so I could be there for the season 12 start, and haven't looked back or come up for air ever since. And I do run the Supernatural TFW.
Turn off Mike's link.
And I do run the Supernatural TFWNC group, so lots of Supernatural. Well, we went through a lot of the different faces of Dean that we got to see in 15 years, and we didn't get through all of them. So in no particular order in terms of when certain appearances of Dean showed up, let's dive into Cowboy / Frontier Dean. Now, we saw that in Frontierland. We also saw it in Tombstone. Jensen Ackles said that when he told his dad he was going back in time to play a cowboy, his dad said he'd been preparing for that since he was 6. So he loves the Cowboys just as much as we love him as a cowboy. Carole, what do we love about Frontier Dean?
First of all, Jensen Ackles looks fantastic in a cowboy hat. Can't go wrong there. Tombstone was kind of like a lighter, transitory moment, but he still enjoyed it. But Frontierland, oh my gosh, here was Dean living out boyhood fantasy. You can just picture him being 4 years old and running around in his little cheesy cowboy hat and a little tin star that said sheriff, right? With his little, because back then you could play with little toy guns. And here he was going whole hog on it, to the point where everyone's looking at, what are these clothes that you have bought? And he had poor Sam in a serape, and then he met the reality of it, where you have saloon girls with really bad teeth and whiskey that's basically lighter fluid and stuff. But he sailed into those moments full bore. He really enjoyed it, and we enjoyed, as always, when you see Dean having such a happy moment where for a moment everything has left him, the weight's off his shoulders, he's just having fun, and this is one of those moments. So we immediately are drawn into that and have fun with him.
Okay, Anne?
Well, yeah, he draws us in. There's so many lighter things about I love Posse.
He's a posse.
I mean, just
You liked it?
And seeing him in a full-length duster. I love those coats. Yeah. Anyway, I mean, seeing him, but it was really fun seeing him adjust to what was different about that time, and that it was real, that people got killed, and that there was a supernatural element even back then. And also the funny thing about, you know, he's sending Sam off on the horse and Sam doesn't really know how to ride a horse. You know, that's pretty funny.
Horse is too small.
Yeah.
Poor horse.
Poor horse. But then, you know, flash forward to when they're fighting the guy who was the I guess, was he a ghoul? I can't remember.
Phoenix.
Yeah. No, well, no, he's a phoenix, but the other episode where
Oh yeah.
they were trying to find, they were looking for the guy, and he was just all about all the, you know, Doc Holliday, all the historical cowboy guys. That was really interesting, that we saw a side of Dean that he was totally obsessed with that, and that was interesting to me too, because I've gone through an obsession with Doc Holliday, despite the fact that he's a racist son of a bitch. But sorry, but anyway, it was really interesting to me. That episode was interesting to me for that aspect too. And as always, you know, Jensen just brings these different characters to life through Dean, which is amazing to me.
Melissa?
The joyful exuberance at the beginning of Frontierland, where he's like, oh, we're gonna go back in time, I'm gonna get to be a cowboy. And he goes and he buys the serape, and I'm sitting there going, oh baby, no, please honey, no. And he's just,
What,
he
you mean
gets there,
wasn't accurate?
and he's just, the joy is just exploding out of him. And it's so cool to see, because we don't get to see that very often from Dean. He's so focused and so serious, and he's got a job to do, and it's this never-ending job. And he's just all full of fire and spark and joy, until that moment when the saloon girl comes up to him and he starts to realize, oh, wait a minute, this is the real past as opposed to the spaghetti westerns that I adore. And sort of watching that shift from, this is the coolest thing ever, to, oh, wait a minute, yuck, no, this reality isn't what I was expecting. That was fun.
Okay. Elektra?
Those two episodes, I adore them both, but I have to understand them as being part of two different realities, because in the one episode, you see Dean as the guy who studies history, and he's obsessed with the Old West, and he knows everything about Doc Holliday and the Earps and all of these other old West gunfires, and when they lived and when they died and what they did. And he seems to understand the historical period really well. And in Frontierland, when they're going back in time, he doesn't seem to understand what the Old West was really like. So
Well,
they belong to different continuums. Because when he goes back in time, it's almost reminiscent of, you know, geez, didn't he see Back to the Future 3? Because they're using all the same jokes. I did recreation for a long time, and we always used to refer to recreating the Middle Ages, you know, the good ones without the Black Plague and the rats, and with modern plumbing, because we liked pretending it was the Middle Ages, but not the real Middle Ages with all the bad stuff. And that was kind of that was the Wild West he wanted to go back to, the one that didn't have all the diseases and things. But boy, yeah, those are fun, and they show us a side of Dean that's just this is the stuff he would be doing if only he didn't have this damn job that keeps him so busy all the time. He would be going to Wild West shows.
Well, and I figure that Jared not being able to ride a horse is right up there with Jensen not being able to sing. We know better. We've heard Jensen sing, and we've seen Jared ride in Walker. So, and they're Texas boys, so I'm sure they knew how to ride a horse. But that was fun, and we did feel bad for the horse. I can kind of give Dean a pass on not knowing some of those things in Frontierland because that was still pretty early. By the time we get to Tombstone, it's at least 5 years later. He could have been a quick study. I mean, so I can kind of give him a pass on that. But I agree, there were two warring interpretations there. So let's move on to Yellow Fever. We get to see Scaredy Cat Dean. And
he just really embraced, I mean, as an actor, Jensen really embraces what the whole being scared means. And I mean, that whole speech about, running, who does that? Crazy people. I mean, that was brilliant. And I know that was the writers, but it was also the way he delivered that just really is fabulous. And then he had to go through the illusions, the hallucinations of different things. And of course, the when he screams with the cat jumping out of the locker is, classic. But I mean, just the whole thing about being afraid was so different from the Dean that we knew. And Jensen just nailed that. And he nailed it in a way that made us believe that that was Dean. And that's amazing acting. And whatever the writers wrote, his acting was amazing in that. And I just, it still is a scary thing for me to watch him have to react to all of that.
yeah, Melissa?
Ditto, everything Anne said. But also, at the end of that episode, he's fighting his own hallucinations. You can see he's gone past the laughing, you can laugh at it kind of scary too. He's really terrified and he's dealing with the hallucinations. But then the sheriff comes in and he's fighting through his own fears to talk down the sheriff because he wants him to calm down because he doesn't want the guy to die. And I love that bit. I love that moment where it's like, once again, Dean is Dean, no matter what, Dean is Dean. And here he's terrified. He knows he's about to die if Sam and Bobby can't figure this thing out. And yet he's still trying to save somebody else. I thought that was beautiful. And I thought there's a moment when Sam says, well, what were your hallucinations? And Dean he lies. He doesn't tell him the truth because it's always mission 1, protect Sammy. And then of course, this episode also gives us one of those iconic moments, Eye of the Tiger. Sorry. Even though it has nothing to do with him being scared, you can't be a Supernatural fan and not love that bit.
Very true. Elektra?
Well, one of the things that comes to mind from this is that there have to be times in Dean's life, not Jensen's, where Dean is actually scared and he puts it behind him and goes and does whatever he needs to do, because that's who Dean is as a character that we've come to know and love through 15 seasons. And I think that informs the choices the writers made when they wrote what Dean did when he was frightened and he had to suck it up and help somebody else, and why he was able to, because that's what he does when it's a situation that would scare anybody else. He's just like, well, we have to go in there. We have to go into the dark, scary hall and find the monsters and deal with them, because that's our job. And we do this day in and day out. It made it very interesting to watch him deal with the things that he was scared of, and them throwing in the jump scares just because they could. But he just coped, because that's what Dean does. And it was very true to the character in so many ways. I give Jensen kudos, and I give the writers kudos for giving us a Dean who showed that he was scared, but also showed that, you know, it's all business.
Mm-hmm.
It's a scary thing we do.
Mm-hmm. Carole?
Well, certainly, I agree that here we have an exposed Dean. There's no facade. The facade of cocky, the facade of, you know, I've got this, not to worry. All of that's been stripped away, and we just have raw, tender Dean. And so many kudos to Jensen, because he never backs away from this stuff. He never is like concerned about how he looks, or this is, you know, beneath my character, or how can I, you know, be a fraidy cat when I'm really rough and tough. He just goes with it, and he goes all the way with it, and it just is sublime. It's hilarious, you know, and it's subtle when he's just like a snake. And I mean, he can do it subtly, and he can do it big, and yet it is always Dean. We never think, oh, we're watching Jensen now. It is still always Dean, and he just takes it as far as he can.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add, except it's a great episode, and he turns in a phenomenal performance. Now, Purgatory Dean. Melissa?
Sorry about that. I loved Purgatory Dean because we see Dean sort of stripped away from all of the cultural stuff. He's there, and he's got to find his way out, and he's got to find Cass, and he's got to figure this out, and he's got to not get killed. And he's so focused and driven, and watching the at first uneasy alliance with Benny, and see that develop into a real friendship by the time they get themselves out of purgatory. That was really interesting, because Dean's always the one who's not wanting to give the monsters a pass, and yet you see he's purely brutal. They're just kill everything, and yet he's letting this monster have his back, and that was really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. Elektra?
Well, I love Benny's character. I was really, really sad when they killed off Benny. And I adored the way, as we finally, they pieced together the backstory of what really happened in purgatory, how, you know, Benny came into the picture as somebody who saved Dean's ass, and then said, look, I know the way out, but I'm going to need you to help me. And it started out as purely transactional, and then worked its way over to, you know, really, we can trust each other. And it was a really, really nice watching that friendship become something. And by the time they came out, they were really close. And you could see it, the way the body language of the actors when they said goodbye. Clearly, they had also become friends at that point. I love the purgatory sequence. The way that he described it is, you know, it was just a singular experience of, well, you know, you fought monsters and you killed things and you tried to get to your goal, and that was it. There wasn't a whole lot going on in purgatory.
Mm-hmm. Carole?
Purgatory Dean. So in Yellow Fever, we got Dean without the cocky bravado facade. In Purgatory Dean, we have Dean with all civility stripped away. There's no societal norms or behaviors. It is kill or be killed. And Dean can relate to that. He gets it. You know, he's always gotten it. And it's been more a matter of making it fit into everything else. And here, he doesn't have to make it fit into everything else. That's it. Kill or be killed. And Dean, he ain't going to be killed. And it's almost kind of interesting as well, because if we flash back to Dean in the end, where he has been without Sammy for many years, and he has become a stone cold killer. And here he is in Purgatory again, and without Sammy, and he's a stone cold killer. So once again, he doesn't have that balance. He's just got, I've got to survive. He will do whatever to survive. And we're with him on that, but it's chilling. It's really chilling, you know, to see him in that really super stripped down mode of survival.
Mm-hmm. Anne?
Yeah, I totally agree, Carole. And it's also in one of the flashback episodes, he or Benny, when they're talking, describes being in Purgatory as it was pure.
Mm-hmm.
And it was black and white, and Dean didn't have to think about killing Amy Pond and making Sam unhappy. He didn't have to think about, you know, the gray area about and I can't remember in context about the werewolf girl that they didn't kill. But I also think that in that, when Dean came back from Purgatory, it helped him see that there is a gray area because of Benny.
Yeah.
In main part, he could see, okay, you know, Benny did me a solid. He helped me get out of Purgatory. And Benny said, I'm not going to drink, people. I'm drinking from, you know, black market, you know, blood banks or whatever. So I think that became a way that Dean saw a different kind of a balance between good and evil, monsters and not monsters, and monsters that could help in a way that he had never realized that before. I mean, while he was in Purgatory, yes, he was totally kill or be killed. We're getting out of here. He had a goal. Save Cass, get out of here. Okay, maybe save Benny too, which I love Benny. Benny's one of my favorite characters, but it just, I think the time in Purgatory changed Dean changed the character and changed Dean in a way that we would not have seen had he not gone to Purgatory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think all of that is true. And I come back to Dean saying that he and Sam keep each other human. And we have seen what Dean becomes when he doesn't have Sam around. And I think just the absence of not wanting to have Sam see him like this, or wonder what Sam thinks of him, or to disappoint Sam, or to have Sam judge him. He didn't have any of that on him in Purgatory. Sam never had to know exactly what it was like. And I think that freed the more ruthless side of him in a way that sort of like not having a soul turned Sam into a stone cold killer. So I think that not having to live up to being Sam's big brother in Purgatory was one of the things that also contributed to that transformation. Now, Dementia Dean. Regarding Dean, whether that's witch dementia or witch-induced Alzheimer's or whatever we want to blame it on, we saw the slow erosion and forgetting that Dean went through. And really, that was an award-worthy performance. But what are your thoughts about it, besides the fact that Jensen was awesome? Carole?
Well, it was just heartbreaking.
Mhm.
You know, we saw it moment by moment as the sand slipped beneath his feet. And even the most core things to Dean Winchester, you know, his name, his brother, bit by bit slip away. And it's not even just that it slips away. He knows it's slipping away. And that's where the heartbreak comes in. If it just happened, we would feel really bad for him. But we see him realizing it's happening. And therein, it's tenfold the pain, you know, because he's like, I had it. It's right there. I've got, and it's gone. And he knows it. And he's not even devastated. It's just he's being emptied, and he's got to watch every little dribble of sand fall down the, you know, the sand thing.
Yeah,
And-
hourglass.
Thank you. I don't know why that escaped me. And
Which pet cast a spell on you?
and it's terrible. It's just terrible. It's painful, and his pain is our pain. And yes, so many kudos to Jensen. And if genre shows could just frickin' win an Emmy, that would have been one of them.
Okay. Elektra?
That one just breaks my heart every time I watch it, just because I'm sure I'm not the only one that has a family member I've watched go through that in somewhat slower time frame. And yeah, just watching that happen so fast. The writing on that is just gifted, the way they put it together, and they're trying to find the person and get this back before he's so far gone that he'll wander off, or it just won't be worth it, or he'll be gone. It just, I have a hard time watching that episode.
Melissa?
This one's a hard one to watch. So, and everyone else has already talked about the really gut-wrenching moments that are amazing. Jensen does an amazing job portraying them. There are a few moments of un-Dean-like joy. Sam finds Scooby-Doo on the TV, and Dean is just, he's a 6-year-old. He's completely and utterly enthralled. He's joy-filled. And Rowena's hair, when he's talking about her curl, her bouncy red curls, and he's just, there's enough of his memory has stripped away that you get who Dean might have been if he wasn't a hunter. He's just this playful kind of fun. He's happy in those few beats before he remembers that he's losing his memory and everything else that's coming down. And when Rowena bops him on the nose, I don't know whether to laugh or cry at that moment. It's just one of those brilliant moments that always I end up laughing and crying, because it's like, she could never do that to Dean. Not in a million years. Maybe Sam towards the end, but never Dean. But yet she does it, and it's one of those perfect little moments for me.
Well, and she hands him a voodoo doll to play with. Here, play with.
Yeah.
And I kept wondering, like, who is the person who's getting the weird stuff?
Yeah.
And that's so Rowena.
Yeah. And
Well, yeah, I mean, I love seeing the bits where some of that Dean guilt and Dean whatever is going on falls away, and he's just kind of happy. And but it's a heartbreaking episode for me. My mother had dementia, and I saw her lose a lot of what she was. Of course, with her losing some of that was probably a good thing. But some of it was very sad. That, I mean, she mostly remembered me. And I think that Dean mostly remembered Sam, the most important person in his life. But it's just a credit to the writers, to Jensen, that they were able to combine both the gravitas of him losing his memory and combine it with, well, yeah, if he didn't have all this going on, he would be more lighthearted. And I thought it was wonderful. I thought it was also a wonderful part for Rowena, for Ruth, to come in, and she came in and she was totally helping in a way that that was the first time I really trusted her in many ways, because she came through. And I know we're talking about Dean, but that was the first time I really trusted that Rowena was on their side. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the voodoo doll just made me laugh like crazy. And and the end where, Sam goes, brother, witch, that's like, and Jensen, there's something in there, and Jensen knows, or Dean knows that that's the brother. He knew it.
Yeah, I love that even though Rowena told him to stay in the car, his Sammy sense was tingling, and he went to save Sam. Mm-hmm. And I loved when he opened the trunk, and there are Post-it notes on everything, and the Post-it note on the grenade launcher just says, no.
Yeah.
No, Sam wrote that. And yes, when he unquestioningly, brother, witch, bam, there's just no hesitation at all. And he holds up the witch killing bullets Post-it. And then his kind of mean joke at the end, where he almost tricks Sam into thinking he didn't get his memory back, and you felt so bad. I mean, you really Sam just sort of really wanted to, I'm glad you're better, but now I want to punch you, sort of, yeah, brother.
Right.
So I thought that was really great as well. And the ending, that coda we got at the end with Broomstick Cowboy and Dean on the mechanical bull. I did not remember that song. And so that was a new one for me. And then I looked it up, and then I'm sobbing all over again, because it is such a perfect, we get Jensen Ackles writing a mechanical bull. That's kind of perfect right there. But just the poignancy of that song with it. Okay, there was a little of my heart left. Why don't you just rip it out while we're here? So I thought that was just a brilliant way to end a brilliant episode. So let's talk about AU Dean. Now, in no particular order, there is Scooby Dean. And of course, as Elektra brought up beforehand, this is also the introduction of the purple nightgown, which we see in Last Holiday as well. So Scooby Dean. Anne.
Y'all are probably more of a fan of Scooby Dean than I am, because I was a little bit old for Scooby-Doo, but I do love that episode. But I do really, really love the purple nightgown and flashing Sam. That's hilarious. The whole Scooby-Doo episode, and Dean Dean just sort of dives right in. He's at home immediately. And I realize that's because he watched all this we see about them being in hotels with their dad over the years, and they watched just whatever was on TV. And of course, I'm sure they watched that over and over and over. So he really knows how to nail that whole scenario.
Well, he even says to Sam, this was always on.
Yeah.
It was always there. Yeah. He even knows the name of the episode.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Melissa?
I too am not a huge Scooby fan, and I watched it, but it wasn't one of those cultural touchstones for me. I like this episode. I loved that Dean was just fanboying. He was just so excited. Just like, oh, cool, look, it's the mystery machine. So this was another one of those moments where for a little bit, Dean gets to just have fun. They're in a cartoon. The only thing they have to worry about is how to get out. Initially they think you can see him relax. He's just having fun being with Scooby and the gang. And that's just fun to see. And, the preview of the purple nightgown that we see later is just,
Carole?
I also am not a huge Scooby fan. I recognize its importance in the pop pantheon and everything, but it just never worked for me. Nonetheless, I do appreciate, as Melissa said, Dean's fanboying. Like, he is ecstatic. Here he is. And his unabashed pursuit of Daphne is pure Dean, and so I enjoy watching it because he enjoys it. And yeah, the purple nightgown is great. And the whole, the little ascot, and he's got to wear that at the end and everything. And everyone's like, what are you wearing that for?
Forgot about that.
So those kind of moments, I enjoy that episode because Dean enjoys it and I enjoy his enjoyment, And as far as the purple nightgown moment in the holiday up, well, I had to watch that scene like 10 times because you talk about your micro expressions. Okay. Jensen's famous for his micro expressions, and the expressions he goes through, if you slow it down and watch, are incredible. And then ending with the whole, and Sam matches him because he's like, and then he looks again. Why does he look again? Why does he look again? Does he think maybe he couldn't believe he saw it, but oh, look, it is really there. So that interchange, but especially the second by second expressions that Jensen's face goes through is incredible. And you think, how can somebody's face reflect so many things in like 5 seconds? But it's priceless. It's absolutely priceless.
Elektra?
Yeah, I'm going to have to join everybody with not being a huge Scooby fan, but I think the reason that Dean was having so much fun is that Scooby is a safe space. He knows that it isn't really a monster there, that it's whatever it is. It's an old guy dressed up as with a mask on, pretending to be a monster. So it's completely safe. And apparently what they were leading us up to was, well, Dean was sitting in motels watching these episodes, and what he always thought was that, Fred was never good enough for Daphne. And obviously he was. And he finally got a chance to go after her, not realizing that, well, she wasn't really into it. And Velma was the one that would have been, totally into him if only he'd given it a shot. It's always the librarians, guys, I always, as far as the second appearance of the purple nightgown, I always thought of that as that's the men of letters Dean, when they were really they were, for all intents and purposes, men of letters. They were living in the bunker. and they were going out on assignments, and they were coming back and eating and sleeping and doing all the things that men of letters did. And they didn't have to find their own cases. They didn't have to, it was a fairly carefree episode for them. And they got to do all the things that they hadn't really done. And it was another time where they had a posse, they had a family. It was great. And those were both really high point episodes because there was some joy in them. And Supernatural is so grim sometimes.
True.
Grim down to bloody and sometimes depressing. And those two episodes had a bit of joy in them. And the Scooby episode is full of silliness.
So I guess I have to carry the name here. I grew up as a kid watching Scooby. I never let go of Scooby as I got older. When I first started, I bought all of the VHS tapes and then later the DVDs, not for my kids, but for me. When I first started working from home, I would just plug Scooby DVDs in and let them run and then take them out and put another one in and just run that all day long and cycle through all of mine. So I own not only the original Scooby-Doo, but all of the subsequent incarnations, both of the live action movies, and all of the made-for-TV animated movies up to about 2016, and I don't own the latest Be Cool Scooby-Doo, but in there also a pup named Scooby-Doo, and yes, I've got all of them.
Wow.
And I love them dearly. So for me, watching my two favorite shows come together and seeing that the writers treated both of them with respect. They didn't parody either of them.
No.
They didn't make fun of Scooby. They treated both of them with a great deal of respect and love. And that just warmed my heart because I was right there with Dean, immediately recognizing which episode they were in and, how this was supposed to go. And I loved the little touches where they stuck to Scooby canon. And for me, that was so wonderful to see that they cared enough to do that. So yes, Scooby and me go way back, and I'm a Scooby girl. And so that's definitely, I love that episode. Dog Dean. For one episode, Dean could talk to dogs. And he was predictably still Dean, almost getting in a shootout with a pigeon. So what do we want to say?
Find out the secret.
He never found out the secret.
Oh, yeah.
Carole?
Well, he was terrific. I liked how at first he just didn't even realize it, and Sam's trying to throw the wad of paper away and Dean keeps going after it. And Sam is like, what is wrong with you? So then later they're aware of it, but the very beginning when he doesn't even know what's happening. And then they're like, oh, is hilarious. And he is still so Dean. He's still got an eye for the ladies, which of course had been somehow incarnated as a French poodle. I guess that is the sexiest she-dog they could think of. And then being the belligerent, interaction with the pigeon and all of this stuff. It's like you took those base, and I don't mean like bases in
Inappropriate?
No, as in it is stripped down. We all have base desires. We need to be fit. We want this, we want that. Those kinds of things where it was stripped down to Dean in dog form. He wanted the girl dog. He wanted to eat. He wanted, these things. And is still so very Dean-like. And then yes, just as he's about to find out like the secret to everything, it's gone.
And
Yeah, I mean, again, Jensen and the writers all just did a fabulous job of turning Dean into a dog. And it just, I remember the first time I watched that episode, and I was just like, what? And then, you know, but he just makes it so believable. And like you said, Carole, it's Dean, but it's also a dog. And you know, he's barking at the mailman. And it just, and then I love it when he lets all the dogs in the shelter go.
That's
You know? I mean, that's so great. And then when he whistles and they all come to attack the dude, I mean, it's another one of those aspects of Dean's character that we don't, that delved into Dean understand. And I think it added, I hope, into Dean's understanding of other, you know, the monster, the not monster, but the other. And I really think it did, because he really, you know, like in the scene where he eyes the French poodle, but it's also about not leaving the dog in the car, you know, and Colonel turns toward him and goes, respect. And so that's a thing, you know, Dean would not have left the dog in the car, even if he couldn't have talked to him. And so, and then, you know, and I think that, you know, in my head canon, it lays the groundwork for Dean's appreciation of Miracle at the end.
Melissa?
What everybody said. The French poodle moment. If I can get through. Okay, so we're all snickering because it was funny, right? It was amusing, but that could have gone very wrong, right? That to me, because it's like you've got this human and they're looking at a poodle, but because Jensen had done such a good job of overlaying that dog thing over to us, when he's looking at the poodle, we're kind of laughing because we know that that's the dog piece of Dean's brain looking at the poodle, and it's fine. But that scene to me could have gone really, really wrong. It could have just been creepy or just not funny. It could have just been a bad idea. And yet, because of what the writers had done and because of all the work that Jensen did to really sell, there's a big piece of Dean's brain operating canine right now. It works and it's funny as opposed to just being, no, don't do that. Just don't go there.
Yeah, I agree. He, you know, and there were so many even gestures where he's like scratching behind his ear, or he's just doing things with his body that are very dog-like. And they're little subtle touches, but they definitely sell that idea that he is really part Dean and part dog, and it makes us believe it. Well, folks, once again, we have blown through our time. We still have quite a bit of list left, so we're going to have to explore whether or not we come back for Dean 3. But this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you all of you for watching and listening. We'll be back with more Supernatural here on Continual. But before we leave, a quick round so everybody can let folks know where they can find you online. Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond, and you can find everything you need to know at untilmidnight.com.
Carole.
You can find me here on Facebook in Continual, in the TFWNC group, and on Twitter, true_firesign10. All of my fiction is on AO3 under firesign10.
Cool. Anne?
You can find me on Facebook under Ann Wicker, and on Instagram under Ann Wicker Ann.Wicker2, and on Twitter as Ann Wicker, and also in the Continual and the North Carolina group that Gail manages, that that Carole just said the initials for, that I can't ever remember.
The group you can't spell. Yes.
Great, thanks. I'm Melissa, and you can find me being a smart aleck of the Supernatural TF,
WNC.
whatever that group is that you run. I give up.
Team Free Will, North Carolina, guys.
Yeah.
I'm pretty easy to find. GailZMartin.com, MorganBryce.com. Look for those names on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. You'll find me. I run the Supernatural TFWNC group here on Facebook, but you can also find me here on Continual. So stay tuned, folks. There'll be a lot more Supernatural coming up on Continual. So we'll see you online.